I'd like to introduce Nancy Cotterill, who is the co-founder of Unite Indy, been my partner in marriage and parenting and life for 40-some, I won't say how many, years now. And take it away, Nancy.
He's told you who I am. He didn't tell you what I do. Day to day, I'm Jim's understudy, his backup singer, his backseat driver, which he hates.
Oh, yeah.
And cleanup hitter for the forums. So that's what I'm here for tonight. While I like to joke, unemployment and poverty are not laughing matters. As most people are aware, our country is now enjoying the lowest unemployment in almost history. I mean, it goes back to 1982. In April, the rate dropped to 3.9%. I should talk into the mic, right? 3.9%, and there are help wanted signs everywhere. But in most of our poorest neighborhoods, unemployment rates are higher. They're not twice as high, and they're not 3 times as high. They're between 4 and 5 times as high as the general public. Just last year, the Crown Hill neighborhood was 23% unemployment, and it's done magnificently over the last year, but it's still 18, so it's not 3.9. It's clear we have an unemployment crisis in our neighborhoods, which is the biggest contributor to high poverty rates. Poverty and unemployment go hand in hand. So to understand and learn about some of the people and companies that are really impacting this situation, let me introduce our panel. First is Greg Kiesling, spelled with 2 G's at the end, not the way it is in the program. He founded Recycle Force in 2003, and the company advocates for and employs ex-offenders. Pastor John Gurton of Christ Missionary Baptist Church of Indianapolis is active in Unite for Change ministry and a proponent of something we'll talk about tonight, which is Jobs for Life. Jennifer Foley is Director of Wellness for Merchandise Warehouse, which supplies warehousing facilities as it shepherds ex-offenders. Eugene Potter of New Life Development Ministries, and that's important, it says New Life Ministries on the program, but it is Development Ministries because he develops people. He gives spiritual support and training in the construction trades to those returning from prison. And Pastor David Cedarquist, our host this evening, is co-pastor of Brookside Community Church and engaged in all areas of improvement in the Brookside near East Side neighborhood. And Damon Lane, we have Damon, who works to help re-entrants and to improve our neighborhoods under the auspices of the, there he is, of the Indianapolis Office of Public Health and Safety. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here and for lending us your insights and expertise. If I could start with David, and I know that we need to talk pretty directly into these mics so that it will be picked up well. David, according to Indy Vitals, the Near East Side neighborhood we are in right now has a 38% poverty rate. Maybe you could start us off with what you found to be the issues that are keeping the people here in Brookside in a situation that they're looking for jobs that they're not finding.
Sure. I think a lot of the issues that we find just doing ministry and family with individuals and doing church together is access. There's a lot of ignorance around jobs for ex-offenders and access to that. A lot of employers don't want to put up with relational issues that do come up. And also, there's a lot of hijacking barriers on a very relational level that when a guy gets $10 in his pocket, and he's prone to addiction, you know, there's a high rate of lack of support to put up with a guy who relapses on his drug of choice or alcohol. And so I think there's just a lot of ignorance around the struggle when it comes to generationally poor individuals. And I bring up all the barriers relationally because really that's what means something to them. I could probably give you 4 other things that are huge barriers, like transportation, lack of jobs in the neighborhood. I mean, I wish we had, you know, I wish Purposeful Design would hire 800 people tomorrow, you know, but it just doesn't work that way. And we would love to have great employers like Dave that would really understand the plight and the issues that our family faces and our neighborhood faces, but the reality is a lot of people don't want to put up with it, and so they just want to put a blind eye to it and stay away from it as best they can and create policies to not allow it to cost the organization more money. And so there's just a lot of lack of access and ignorance around these barriers that these individuals want jobs. They just want a chance, but they're just not necessarily there.
There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that the areas of the highest poverty also have the highest concentration of ex-offenders who are returning to those communities. So we have an area that is pretty devoid of jobs or available jobs, and we have that many more people coming in. Greg, I know this is a passion of yours. Can you give us some insight on how Recycle Force deals with this issue with people coming back and needing work?
Well, we only hire people that are referred to us by criminal justice oversight, and people that are deemed medium to high risk, and we're a subsidized employment program. We work with the state and the federal government to subsidize the employment of people coming home. And this is the best time, because we call our model ABC. So it's the any job when you come to Recycle Force. We then work with Temp to Perm. Keys to Work is our temporary company that gets people into temp work, and then hopefully some get hired permanently. But during this period of time, Congress authorized a big study on us, and I'm very proud to say the data is out. We have it in hand. It'll be released to Congress in the month of June. And while it's far from perfect, the more people worked, the more that we had them working in these temporary employment opportunities, we reduced recidivism by a pretty significant amount. I should say this was a random control trial. So 1,000 people who left the Department of Correction agreed to be in the study. They were randomized, 500 to us and 500 to the others. So I think that's the key answer, is keeping people working. We're not getting people to sail off into the perfect job and make $40,000 or $50,000 a year where they can really live as a middle class, but they're overnight. But we're seeing these small steps where people are earning $6,000 and $7,000, $8,000 over the year. They're getting some amount of food stamps. They're staying out of jail, and over time, they make this passageway.
Kind of baby steps.
Baby steps, yeah.
Jennifer, the problem for decades was that nobody wanted to hire someone with a record.
Right.
How did Merchandise Warehouse begin employing people who had left prison?
We actually stumbled into it. I would love to have some great wow, but we had a packaging company that was inside of our warehouse, and we were desperately needing people to staff it, and we were running out of people. So we started collaborating with Edna Martin Christian Center, and they had some people who'd been trained, and they sent them over to work on our packaging line. Our packaging line actually became an on-the-job training experience so that we could actually vet employees from their experience on the line.
Is there some special structure, or do you do anything in the vein of religious discussion to help these people?
Yes, so one of the things I love about Merchandise Warehouse is that we really invest in our employees. And we believe in having our employees be the best version of themselves. So we put quite a bit of attention, money to our corporate culture, which is to provide a family environment where employees can find acceptance, opportunity, and purpose. So we have quite a few programs that are on site in our company to help support our employees to be successful.
Okay. Eugene, can I ask you a question? Your ministry actually trains men who need a second chance. How do you find these people, or do they find you? And tell us about how you're training them.
We came back to Indianapolis about 10 years ago. And years ago when we started, we found one man that was interested in doing something that was different. We saw that skills training really meant something in terms of the growth of that particular person. I had a construction company in Baltimore, and this guy had come out of prison, and he was 6 years, and he didn't have anything, and I was just getting started in the construction business almost 28 years ago. And we taught him how to do a number of things, and we saw that that just took off. We came, after 20 years in Baltimore doing it, that's how we funded. We never got one grant. And we used the construction business and their abilities and skills training on the job to produce almost 35 employees, and we had 15 jobs at a time going all over Baltimore, building everything. And so when I came back to Indianapolis, it just started happening. And we got an opportunity to have a building, and we used that building and trained the men that first got started, and we saw that they talked to each other. What you doing? I'm working over here. What you doing? I'm with Keesling. What you doing? And all of a sudden they just start coming. And it takes about, when you have somebody that's working with you on the job, it takes about 6 to 8 months for them to really get a skill set. And we found, like over the last 10 years, those guys who came, they got a skill set and they went out, now they're running their own businesses. Now we are actually hiring them to do our subcontracting work.
And we're excited about working with you too.
Yeah.
Jim and I just bought a building for Unite Indy, and your whole group is going to do the work for us, so we love it.
Yeah.
John.
And it's going to be pretty when we finish.
It's going to be beautiful. John and Pastor G, studies show that a lack of early employment in a young man's life is a big, big contributor to an initial criminal action that results in prison. In fact, 1,300 juveniles return to their communities after release from Indiana prisons every year. How do we get kids back into the workforce early, or not back into it, but into it in the first place? And does Jobs for Life kind of click into any of this?
Oh, it Jobs for Life clicks into all of it. Yeah. Jobs for Life is a nationally recognized research and evidence-based curriculum that relies on the church, it relies on the community, and it relies on the business community to really wrap their arms around these young people. One of the statistics that I wrote down, we talked about the unemployment rate not being in the underserved communities nowhere near what it is throughout the nation. Well, we localized our research in 46208, and where we have 18.7% unemployment rate. But when we look at 15 to 19-year-olds, that's 70%. Wow. 70%. And we also looked at the poverty rate, which, of course, you said here is 38%. In this area where we are is 31%, but over 52% of those who are in poverty are 17 and under. So when you kind of juxtapose those numbers, what that says is that that's a recipe for disaster, and that's what we're seeing. Mm-hmm. You're dashing dreams. You're eliminating hopes. When we're not paying attention to these young people. So what we're doing with Jobs for Life is we have, and what I like about it is a lot of the people who are part of this are in the room. We have coaches, we have facilitators, we have wraparound folk, we have people who have resources who are literally wrapping their arms around these young people, because it's not just about jobs, it's about soft skills, it's about identity, it's about community, it's about character, and it's about us taking the time to let those young people know that we care enough to spend the time to do what it takes to not only know who you are, but we want to know what your dreams are. We want to know what your aspirations are. We want to lower the barrier of entry so that we can actually reach that young person and let them know that we're not just trying to throw the Bible at them. We're actually trying to share with them what they need to not only get a job, but to get a job, a better job, and a career, right? So
and that's what it's about. Damon, what are some of the statistics that the city has on youth employment? I know that there have been a lot of efforts involved in getting kids jobs for summer. How does that work?
That particular program has went very well. I don't actually have the statistics. I spoke with your husband about that today. But it has went well, and we look forward to it this year as well. But speaking of some other things, not just with the youth program, that I want to throw out at you. I don't know if you guys caught, we went into the jail May 2nd, and we did what we deemed as making connections, where we took resources into the jail. We had a couple employers, we had healthcare representatives, we had child support, you name it. We took them inside the jail. It was broadcasted on Fox 59 and I believe Channel 4, CBS. And that turned out great. And that was just May 2nd of this month. So we're looking to do that quarterly. We want to do that quarterly and eventually monthly for these guys, because I don't know how much you guys are educated about the House Bill 1006. A lot of people will have to serve their time right here in Marion County Jail, so they will not go to DLC. So therefore, we want to get those guys as soon as possible. In the pod that we're working on, it's actually a reentry pod. These guys are all getting out within 90 days. So the guys that we just served May 2nd will be, one of them's already out. He got out Thursday. So got him connected, and that's going very well. Another program I want to tell you guys that the city's a part of is we partnered with Indy Chamber, and it's called the READY program, and that's R-E-D-Y. I'm sorry. And what that teaches is kind of what Mr. Moore's story is, entrepreneurship. It's not just about employment. Some guys want to come out and start their own business, and that's what this READY program does. We have also intentionally started some work groups where we have partnerships, and what we're trying to do now is get in front of employers and talk about the tax abatements and things of that nature. And that's actually another acronym, HIRED, H-I-R-E-D. And there's all types of capital and investments and things like that that some employers are looking for. So that's another initiative that we're part of. And it's just an array of things that the city is doing. Actually, my boss is sitting in the crowd. I told her I would call her out, the director of reentry. And she and I, we're a part of a lot of different work groups, a lot of meetings. And she's been, for me anyway, she's been definitely an inspiration and a spark. So I can go on and on and on with what the city's doing.
Do you work at all in conjunction with the state, with their hire?
That's why I spelled what I spelled. Yes,
okay.
we also work with hire as well.
Okay. They said they've got a list that has grown to 1,100 businesses and placed 2,000 workers with a 97% retention rate, which is pretty amazing. But one of the things I did in my research was see that the faster a person who's trying to re-enter society gets a job, the better the chances that they won't slip back into some old ways. How fast can we get them a job? I mean, this is an issue. We've got a bunch of people here that are all involved in helping this situation, but people are still falling through the cracks, right? I mean, there are plenty of people who don't find a job. There's a quote on the back of the program that I pulled from a story. The man said, "I couldn't lock down employment for the first 6 months after jail. I wept on the public bus one day. I felt I had failed as a man." I mean, this guy made it. And why? Because he got a job. Mm-hmm. So do you always have openings, Jennifer? I mean, is there always somebody you can hire?
Traditionally, we have had a high turnover rate. However, when we started the process of working with the packaging line and began hiring employees that had a criminal background or had been incarcerated, what we found out is that eventually, of our 10 top employees, 6 of them had been incarcerated. And we have found them to be extremely loyal. Our turnover rate has gone down. So actually, we just opened another warehouse in Pendleton, so we are currently looking for many more employees.
Which highlights another problem. You mentioned it, David, transportation.
Oh,
yes. There are plenty of people here who need jobs, but they can't get to where the jobs are. Right. Does anybody have any thoughts about that? Yeah.
It just really kind of depends. Some of like right now, it's construction season, as well as, I know Reverend Potter knows much about that. I'm talking specifically with a bunch of general contractors, and some of it is in Westfield and Noblesville and those types of areas where the buses don't run. But back to your point, as long as they can get on a bus line again, the city has an initiative where we give some of the programs that provide wraparound services bus passes. We get them. We have a deal with Indigo where we get them, and then we distribute them to some of the programs like PACE and those types of.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah,
I think we also need to spend, really try our best to spend as much time connecting resources in relation to the gaps. Just an example of that piece there, we had, I'm dealing with it right now on my phone as we sit here. Once individuals know where to maybe go to try to find something, they'll keep hammering it or they'll share it with somebody else, like you said, they'll start talking. And so what I try to do is I try to question as much as I can to find out what barriers someone has. And because of the transportation one of the things that I've started to notice is that, for instance, we found a Walmart that would do some hiring. It was on Keystone. And no one had really paid attention to where the bus line was and when the bus stopped running and how long the Walmart stayed open and when were the real jobs available, which was later at night. And we even had another bus stop which stopped and it had a 10-minute walk, which is great job, but nobody thought that it rains and that they were going to a freezer.
Oh.
Right? And so I think one of the things that I'm really trying to do is to think through or to position my team and those who work with us to think through those gaps and really think through the process, because what some people say is they're lazy or we can't retain them or they don't want to work are other issues that we're not really talking about.
So did you go to City Hall and get some kind of a change or to the bus company?
No, we didn't. We just tried to find another employer on a bus line that would run. Or even change. We adjusted to the situation because, as you say, some of these cats, they need jobs now, and so we're pushing buttons.
Well, jobs now are important, but also how much you make, because the studies that I've looked at, if you make $10 an hour, the recidivism rate is very low. If you make 7 to 10, it gets higher, and if it's less than 7, they're practically gone out the door. So. You could answer that question for me, Greg. How important is pay?
Pay is very, very critical, but it's also, on day one, a person needs a job, but they've also got to fulfill the criminal justice mandates. So on day one, you've got to meet with your community correction or home detention officer. You have to be fitted for ankle bracelets. You've got to attend your theft class or your anger management classes, and you have to coordinate those with a work schedule. And I think often people have no idea that's going on. And that's at Recycle Force and Keys to Work. What we're trying to do is create employment that can allow you to fulfill the criminal justice mandates that you've been ordered to. Because often people are left in a position of choosing between their job and fulfilling what the court's ordered. And if you choose to go to work, you're going to get violated and you're going to go back through a technical rule violation, back in prison or jail.
Okay. Here's another economic statistic for you. Families headed by single mothers were over 5 times more likely to be poor, and 85% of incarcerated youth come from families headed by single mothers. There are many who think that not enough is being done about the foundational issue of family structure. With 40% of American babies being born to single moms now, no matter how great a job they do, and there are a lot of single moms who are saviors to their children, their kids still lack a male role model in the home, somebody who goes out every day and does his work and brings home a paycheck to care for them. They lack the strict supervisory nature of a father, the spiritual support, and most of all, to me, they lack the map they need to be great fathers themselves. I guess my question, perhaps to some of the ministers on this panel, is is there a way to build support or recognition of the importance of a 2-parent family without undermining or offending those who choose to be single parents or have to be single parents? Because I think that's a big deal.
Huge.
That's tough. I mean, it's so tough. when you burn so many bridges coming out and the family has discarded you and you're by yourself, I want to just talk about I do men 95% of the time. I just hired a young lady who came out of prison about 7 months ago, and her desire is to help women. This was the first time I've been able to actually train a young lady. I've gotten some real insight. One of the things that we have to be first both strong together. The man has to be strong and the lady has to be strong enough to go into a relationship. My wife and I are working on 43 years now. I know we have to be strong individually to come together collectively and do some things. I think we should get them strong together, one at a time, and then start talking about parenting and men's relationship. I know we're traditional, and I'm very traditional, but it's hard. Every man that comes out, he doesn't usually bring the child with him, but the lady always brings the child. And I think we should develop, one of the things that we're going to do, and we're doing now, for the last 2 years, we developed a training center, and it's the state-of-the-art training center that's going to be, I think, really good for men and women. That'll change the income producing amount that's coming in that house.
It's important.
We're going to have our painters, your painters can make $24 an hour. Your carpenters can make $25 an hour. We're going to train those ladies to be able to take care of those families without the fella. Then if she wants one, she can get him. So I think we've got to have career-based situations that really fit the lady. She can wait tables if she wants to, but she can also, this young lady, we're training her right now to be a developer.
Well, that's great, but in too many cases, we see single moms who are working 2 or 3 jobs. Yeah. So, then they're having to farm the kids out to grandma if they're lucky enough to have a nearby grandma. So it does affect the children. Yeah. David, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, you might not like what I'm going to say, unfortunately. I think looking at a single mom, I think assuming that a child needs a dad in her life or his life is the wrong way to think through the urban problem. Mm-hmm. I know kids who are in 2-parent homes in Carmel who have ruined their life for 15 years sure. over drug addiction, and their dad was present but not. Mm-hmm. I think that the dilemma of the evangelical church, which I would call it churchianity, has created this idea of the family that is totally anti-development of what God is already doing in an urban community. I have experienced more family and more relationship in an urban environment than I ever have in my suburban and rural communities. And I think that kids in the urban context, in spite of the barriers of trauma and the dilemma of violence and multiple previous, incarceration, I think there is greater resilience in the urban core if we were to spend the time and as a church family and be the church and not just expect that mom's got to get with a good dad. And I think that it's a travesty that we've imposed that on my community specifically, to the point where it discourages moms in a place where they're doing a better job than my own mother did. Mm-hmm. And so I think I just don't like the comment, because it really disparages what God is already doing in a community where there is this community support in spite of the barriers.
And that's what the church does best.
Yeah.
My comments were not based on any moral judgment at all.
It was
much
ideal,
more.
though.
It's the statistics that show this, and it's a question that needs to be asked. I mean, you can't just, for political correctness, not say that this is happening. And I think that, most single moms are heroes of the first order. So,
I'd like to add, as far as Merchandise Warehouse, we really believe in like a family environment. And I've noticed that there's a sense of family that starts to support each other. We have an on-site chaplain who comes in and works with people. We have support groups. So we're actually going out into the community and bringing in the resources to our business that our employees need to be successful. So we have many single moms working for us. We have tuition reimbursement. So I see some real uplift within the working family to support.
Which creates an environment of enthusiasm around the job.
Yes, it does.
Yes. John,
Yes.
How important is the I want to go to work thought in the people's minds? I mean, if whether it's recidivism, whether you're trying to avoid, or whether it's just a person who maybe never had that model of somebody going to work every day, how important is it for them to want to be a success?
Oh, it's critical. One of the things about work is that it brings dignity to people's lives and purpose. And I know that, I shared this story with someone earlier today. I mean, for my own self personally, with not having employment led me to contemplating suicide because I couldn't take care of my family. And thank God he intervened. But work is divine. It's biblical, and it has its purpose. And when it is not there, then you can expect some of the other things that we see when people, and then we live in Indiana, or maybe I should say we live in Indianapolis, I don't know, you all can correct me, where people are identified by what they do. And when you don't, quote unquote, do anything, even if you're entrepreneurial and maybe you don't have your elevator speech together, if you can't say what you do, then in a lot of people's eyes, if you don't work for so-and-so and such, who are you then? And that's kind of where we are. And so work is important because it gives one a foundational sense of I'm doing something that is contributing and taking care of my responsibilities. And when you take that away, you really do take away the lifeblood of an individual, which ultimately can take away the lifeblood of their ability to take care of their responsibilities.
And we live in systems. We're controlled by the systems that we've created. We've had two really major wars, the war on poverty and the war on crime. And both of those have sort of clashed into each other. And many of you know that I lost my son in the war for Iraqi freedom. And I always question if that was a correct war, but at least it sort of fit the definition of what we call war. And I think that these systems are what is affecting our behavior more than we acknowledge. And I think the number one step that I call for everybody is let's stop declaring war on ourselves. These are people that are in poverty trying to figure out how to live as singles moms or to bring the families together, because in our work, we see the absent father as a major issue, or not having two parents, because it's not only just a father, it's also mothers that are gone as well. And then with our war on crime, to keep ourselves safe, sometimes we go too far in those. So that's really my appeal to this work, is to stop declaring war. Let's look at our policies. Let's look at how we're trying to bring people out of poverty, how we're trying, the welfare system that it ended up being an enablement system. But the war on crime is obviously incarcerated way more people than it should have, and the war on drugs. So that's really my call in this work, is let's stop declaring war. God doesn't want us to declare war, at least I don't think, on each other.
Yeah,
let me speak on that one point. A few years back, about 5 years back, when we were with Greg in a program that lasted about a year and a half, 2 years. 2 years. And it was an outstanding program. We had men and women that pretty much had never worked. Never worked. And one of the men got dropped off at his program, but his uncle basically was with him to drop him off and said, well, would you want to come over to New Life? And the guy didn't know anything about us. He came. Now, this is his history. he had been incarcerated 53 times at the city lockup. He had 13 felonies, and he had been to the penitentiary 6 times. Wow. He went to Goodwill and he couldn't get a job. Now, Greg and I's responsibility in this program was to go back and forth and give the men each other back and forth. If he couldn't handle it, I would take him. If I couldn't, we'd go back and forth. Mm-hmm. This man came to work for us, and he had no skills. One day I saw him working on a car, and I said, that's a transferable skill in the plumbing. We put him with our master plumber, and guess what he is? A plumber. You're talking about want to work? Mm-hmm. This man, when the program stopped, now this is an indictment now to others that don't help, to the organizations that won't give us resources, to people who won't give us money, and won't give us the support when we do all the work, okay? The program was stopping, we were out of money, we had 40 employees. I had to bring the men in and say, I can't pay you. I had to make a decision who was going to get cut. This man sit in front of me and he says, I'm not going anywhere. He said, I'm going to come to your place and sit in front of your place no matter what. I said, whoa. I kept him. He's not gone back to prison. And he has all the skills necessary to do all the work in construction, from plumbing to X to Y to Z. If a person has a job, you change them 100%. It takes about 6 to 8 months to really get it filtered down to them. But this man caught on. We got a chance to paint Crown Hill's fence. It took us 2.5 years. And our chairman of the board, Jay Bremer, has helped us so much. Had he not gone deep in his pocket to help us, we wouldn't have made it. And this man at the last said, I will help paint that fence, winter, summer, fall, whatever, just to stay out of prison. But others, when we knocked on the door to get help, didn't get no help.
But it saves the state a great deal of money.
Pardon me?
When people are working, even if they're paying some of that, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's the study that I talked about earlier. That's the same study that Gene's referring to, and we think at some level that we need to have a small amount of subsidy, because we're moving into more automation. There's less people in the workforce. I think we're down to 60% workforce participation rate, and we're going to have less and less of this, and we've got to figure out ways to subsidize work that might not get done otherwise. And that painting of that fence is a good example of that, of what got happened with some subsidized employment.
So what can we do if we wanted to get 2 takeaways from our discussion tonight? Things that individuals can do who are listening or watching this online, things that they could maybe encourage an organization that they're involved with to be a part of. What do we need to encourage a growth in opportunity for people who have been in prison, and just a growth of opportunity in our urban areas where there is just a dearth of jobs?
I'm going to just sort of chime in on a little bit of what my friend from Brookside here, the pastor, has suggested. A lot of people who are looking at the individuals who are not working, who are seeking, and they need to change or alter or adjust their perspective on people who are not working. I don't know how else to say that, because there's an assumption that
I understand.
People are not working because they're lazy or because they're, and I remember walking downtown, and a guy came up to me and he asked me for some money or something. And I said, well, I was getting ready to ask you. He said, well, I don't have a job. I said, I don't either. I said, the only difference is that when I got up this morning, I decided that I was going to walk out of my house as if I had one, you know? But this person that I was talking to at that time, I wanted to help him but not hurt him with a preconceived notion, because that's the way people would look at me. They saw how I was and they assumed that I had a job. They assumed that I had money. Well, no, I didn't. And so I think it goes both ways. To assume that that person doesn't want to is the wrong assumption. This preconceived notion that folk who aren't work or late, it's just, I've got an issue with, because that was me, That's why and I know that's why God put me through it, so that I would understand it, because I thought with all that I had going on, I ought to be good. And I'm thinking, for those who dropped out of high school, those who have a felony, those who, have all these other barriers, you have children, you have child care, you got one that's autistic, you got another one that's, sick and all that kind of stuff. I'm thinking, if I am struggling with what I got going on, and my God, what in the world, how in the world did these resilient people make it to where they are? And all they're saying is, give me a shot. And the first way you give somebody a shot is take all of that other stuff off and stop labeling these people as lazy, because they're not.
Right.
They do more, some of them do more in the first 3 hours, and some folk do all month.
Well, they're killing themselves to get a job, and they're being turned down. So you can't, that's not lazy.
No, it's not.
So I'd like to add, in the aspect of my job, I work with almost every employee one-on-one, and I am humbled every day by the stories that people are dealing with. We have employees, it takes 2 hours to get to work and 2 hours to get home. And we were addressing the transportation issue, and our warehouse is located in the industrial section of Indianapolis on the southwest side. And if you look at the bus routes, like a circle, 1/4 of that pie, there are no bus routes over there whatsoever. So we're looking at actually changing our hours so that they could at least walk over to Meridian and catch the bus. But I have seen, this whole aspect of thinking that people are lazy. I'm just always empowered and impressed by the people who, what they're dealing with, have actually come to work. And we have a perfect attendance award, and it's always full every month. I mean, people are there. I have not seen lazy whatsoever. We have people that it's like, okay, you need to go home. They're asking for overtime. It's just incredible. And
it sounds to me like one of the takeaways here is that we need to be more flexible. We need to be more flexible in allowing people, like you said, maybe change the hours, maybe change a bus route, see what we can do to get people to the jobs, and realize that they might not have a car. They need help to get there. And if they're not working, that could be why.
Yeah, we're trying also within our company to have a carpool, basically where our drivers, people will pay gas and drive in different sections of Indianapolis to help pick up other employees. We're still new with that, but transportation is really a big issue.
And you started to say this, and I know that Pastor G has said this before: get a job, get a better job, get a career.
ABC.
ABC.
Job, better job, career.
Yeah.
And my appeal is, since I've been doing this work, the Department of Correction budget, I think, has gone from about $200 million to $1.2 billion. I know in our city budget, we spend about a little over $1 billion, and 92 cents of every dollar are spent on the courts, the police, the sheriff, probation, and the jail. And so I'm making this and we decry the growth of government, and we're all complaining about how high is government, but nobody ever talks about the rapid rise of our criminal justice system. So I'm asking for a 2% shift, that we begin to think, how can we move 2% of our criminal justice budget into subsidized employment? I bet Purposeful Design could do it. Goodwill's doing it now. We're doing it. I'm hoping Merchandise Warehouse. Gene has done it with us before. It brings up, where does capitalism start? Where does supported employment, supposed to work? But that's my real call.
And it doesn't have to be forever.
It's not. It's a transitional job.
It's a transitional job.
It's a period of time. It's cheaper. We have a young man that was featured in the story on The Atlantic. He's 19 years old. He's first incarcerated at 15. We spent $85,000 of taxpayer dollars incarcerating him. We spent $1,000 to subsidize employment. And we're out of money, just like Gene was saying. We don't have enough work. I mean, the work is there, but it's not profitable work. And where we can begin to say, okay, how can we bring in a little bit of revenue, subsidize that revenue, bring probation and parole around to work with us, bring the courts in, so we can give folks this fighting chance to develop that work history, what we call developing the work muscle, so they can move to the better job and then move to the career. So that's my appeal. 2%, everybody. 2% budget.
And does the city have your ear and the state have your ear?
I think the city does. I'm still working with the state. We've just elected new Indiana State Senator, Mr. Rod Bray, or the head of the Senate. Amazingly, he saw the Atlantic, or was talking about the Atlantic article.
Wow.
We may be meeting with him soon to begin to talk about this issue. So I think both sides of the aisle are beginning to realize that the cost of doing this is eating us alive,
right.
And there's better ways to do this.
Right.
There's better ways to help people work and support their work. The jobs program for this community.
I believe as well, we have to rethink how we go after helping the providers. We think as providers, we're always against each other, warring for the same dollars. And we go out every day to try to help those who have the greatest need. And I had a funder, and I still use this because it infuriates me all the time, so I use it. Sometimes I got to get upset to get going. They told me, they wrote me a letter, and they had funded us several times, many times, and they said, we don't think we want to refund you because we don't think it's a good return on investment. Wow. And our recidivism rate over a 3-year period was 7 to 15%, and we were working with maybe 30, 40 guys at a time. So if you take 25,000, in California it's 63, but we're not in California, 1,000 a year. But you take $30,000 times the 40 guys that I had, and you took, and you're gonna give me 40, but you wouldn't give me 40 because you wrote me an email and you said, I don't think it's a good return on investment.
Right. And recidivism rate is what, like 38%, 35?
Depends on how you measure it.
Yeah.
The return to
Generally.
DOC is about for the state it's 38, for Marion County it's about 50.
So you were doing real well.
Yeah.
We were doing about 7 to 15, depending on where it was. Nation on 3 years is about 67 to 70%.
We have to wrap this up because I don't want to keep our group any longer than we promised, but Jennifer, if you have another statement.
I do want to add that there are incentives for employers who hire felons. There's a work opportunity tax credit, and there's also a federal bonding program.
Okay,
so
something we should all be aware of. Thank you so much for being with us and your thoughts and your impressions. I think we learned a lot. Appreciate it.